Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the first video in my series of Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate deck techs. I'm covering every legendary creature and background from Baldur's Gate in no particular order, so let's get to it. As you see, today our commander is OG the Exquisite Blade. From what I can tell, we don't have any published lore on OG, which is a shame. From their art and their flavor text, they seem like a cool character, and I've always been a fan of monks in D&D. At least our deck will tell a story for them. I'm excited to show you what I put together for OG, but before we get started, let's go over our deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander. I want to show off why it's such a cool card and why I thought it deserved a deck of its own. So I take about 30 cards and put them toward doing whatever my commander asks of me. This is our game plan. It's what we do at the table and how we try to win. 30 more cards go towards supporting that game plan in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction pieces. I usually run 1 or 2 sweepers, sometimes more if it would play into the game plan, sometimes none at all, and I almost always keep to a floor of 38 lands. That way I can always hit my land drops and cast my spells and, play commander. So let's talk about our commander. OG the Exquisite Blade is a 2/3 legendary human monk for 2, a white and a blue, that says when OG enters, we gain 2 life and scry 2. And whenever we cast our second spell each turn, we exile up to 1 target creature we control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. First, let's go over some terminology just in case you're unfamiliar. OG's second ability exiles a creature, then returns it to the battlefield immediately, which means we'll get any triggers from it having entered or left. This process is called blinking or flickering a permanent. Some people say that blinking and flickering are different things, but the terms are used interchangeably. In addition, even though abilities that trigger when we cast our second spell date all the way back to Gatecrash, it was Tarkir Dragonstorm that gave them the ability word Flurry. Interestingly, we can trace both that term and its connection to monks back to Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. Thanks for your help, Monk of the Open Hand. So now we can see both what OG wants us to do and how they reward us for doing it. Once we get them on the battlefield, we want to spend each of our turns thereafter using our mana to cast at least 2 spells. Technically, OG likes it when we cast our second spell on our opponent's turns too, but we're still an initiate in the ways of monkery, and we're following a slightly different path. However we cast our second spell, OG allows us to blink something when we do. That means we want a deck full of creatures that give us value when they, or something else, enter or leave, and therein lies the rub. Getting OG's trigger means having enough mana to cast multiple spells in a turn, but we're less likely to draw our cheap spells if our deck is full of the kind of huge, powerful creatures that we might want to blink. Sure, we can target OG themselves if we want to, and that's often a great fallback option for our flickers. A little life can sometimes go a long way, and a free scry 2 is great for setting up our coming turns. But the problem of mana efficiency remains. What I've done is take a middle path, focusing on repeated value that raises us incrementally toward victory. We have a host of 2 and 3 drops to ensure we can double spell, many of which are solid flicker targets for OG themselves, so that the turns we're playing 5 and 6 drops are both impactful and often accompanied by a second spell even then. We have a few tricks up our sleeve as well, like mana discounts and rebates and bonus spells, and it doesn't take long for our board to come together into something formidable. Which brings us to our next problem, winning the game. The challenge with blink decks is that they end up taking long turns full of game actions that end with them in practically the same state as they began, having made no real progress toward ending the game. That's not the case with our deck, and the reason is a little counterintuitive. Our blink deck doesn't do much blinking. Because instead of focusing on the quantity of blinking, we emphasize the quality of what we're blinking. That is to say, we're getting fewer blinks per turn cycle than a comparable deck, but the ones we get are more reliable and more helpful to our victory condition. But what does that look like in practice? First, we have a solid number of card advantage pieces, both in the form of permanents we can flicker to get more cards, and in the form of payoffs that give us cards when our deck does its thing. By keeping our hand full, we can always take advantage of the most options for the mana we have in each turn. Second, we prioritize creatures over non-creature spells in this deck, meaning the kind of value we accrue is diverse and effective against opponents who play more to the board, tokens, removal effects, and protection, as well as strong bodies to disincentivize attackers or soak their damage when they can't be deterred. Finally, we combine our wide board with a handful of Wincons that our insane card advantage can help us dig for, whether it's turning our creatures into flyers and swinging in like we're playing elves, exalting our most evasive attacker, or just cratering our opponent's defenses and strolling in to deliver a killing blow. We're able to keep the game going or to end it when we decide we're ready. That's our plan. We play a lot of Magic, letting our spells fly high and trusting that OG will help us stick the landing. We play fast, not just to keep our opponents from getting bored with a blink deck at the table, but also to make it clear that our turns are as decisive as our victory will be. We supplement our commanders blinking when we need to, and throw up walls to hold off enemy attackers while we run out creature after creature, all of which can help us close things out in the end. Our opponents will give up trying to keep track of our board, as creatures blink in and out, spells and triggers litter the stack, and OG helps us remain the calm, unflappable center amid our flurry of flickers. You'll enjoy this deck if you want to reap the rewards of careful sequencing choices without feeling like there are overwhelmingly many each turn, or if you like the idea of this cool commander getting a new story every time you shuffle up, all of which involve flashing blades, furious blows, and double-fisted triumph. So as usual, this Moxfield list we're going over today is linked in the video's description. At the bottom of it, you will find a considering section, filled with cards that I considered putting in the deck, but ultimately which didn't make the cut for me. However, if you have a bigger budget, or a smaller one, although today's budget is pretty small, if you like what I've done here and you want to go harder into it, or if you're interested in some of the things I've done, but you want to kind of juke in a different direction, very monk-like of you, that considering section is a great place to begin and get inspiration when you build your own OG the Exquisite Blade deck. So let's get into it. We're going to begin with our second spell section. This is a section of cards that, much like OG, cares about us double spelling on each of our turns or each turn that we're able to. We have 12 of these cards. All of them are going to help us to get some value. We're going to start with Clarion Spirit from Kaldheim. It's 1 and a white for a 2/2 spirit that says whenever we cast our second spell each turn, we make a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. So a 1/1 flyer every time we cast our second spell. Sounds good to me. Free extra creatures in the air, and it comes with a bear. Nice. Next we have Monk Class. This is from AFR as well. It's a class enchantment, which means it comes in for a white and a blue, and it has this first ability immediately. At sorcery speed, we can level it up from the level 1 it begins at to level 2 for a white and a blue. Then once it's level 2, again at sorcery speed, we can pay 1 a white and a blue to level it up to level 3, and once it's level 3, it has all of these abilities. So it gains the abilities as we level it up. You get it. So when it first comes in, level 1 is the second spell we cast each turn costs 1 generic mana less to cast. This is a great effect. Being able to look at our mana and say we actually have 1 more as long as we're willing to cast our spells in such a way so that the second spell has a generic mana component to it is pretty great. It can really add to each of our turns, which is why we have a couple of different versions of that effect in this deck. But just here, for just 2 mana, to essentially give us an extra mana every subsequent turn is pretty sweet. Then at level 2, whenever this class becomes level 2, we return up to 1 target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So we can use level 2 to sort of judo throw one of our opponent's non-land permanents back to their hand, so it's a little bit of a removal effect. And then at level 3, at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. For as long as it remains exiled, it has, you may cast this card from exile as long as you've cast another spell this turn. So obviously we still have to pay for those spells, and the timing restrictions on them still apply, but it essentially means we get access to an extra card every turn beyond just the one we drew during our draw step, as long as that card is not the first spell we cast during each of our turns. And if we choose not to cast that card, we can always cast it on a later turn, either as the second spell or maybe the third spell, whatever it may be. And remember, if those cards are in exile and we still have Monk Class in play, we're going to get this discount on whichever spell we cast second. Nice. Next we have Taigam Master Opportunist. This is from Tarkir Dragonstorm. This is a 2/2 legendary human monk for 1 and a blue with a Flurry ability. It says whenever you cast your second spell each turn, copy it. Then exile the spell you cast with 4 time counters on it. Time counters don't have an inherent mechanical meaning, they're just used by the suspend mechanic, because then that spell gains suspend if it doesn't have it. Basically, suspend means at the beginning of our upkeep, we take a time counter off of that spell that's in exile, and when we remove the last one, we can cast that spell without paying its mana cost, and if it's a creature, it has haste. So the idea with Taigam is, if we were to, let's say, have Taigam out, and then Clarion Spirit is the second spell we cast in a turn, what will happen is the original Clarion Spirit will go into exile, and 4 turns later, we'll get to cast it for free, and it will have haste. But even before that happens, we make a copy of it. That copy is going to remain on the stack after we've exiled the original one with its time counters on it, and then resolve. So we get our Clarion Spirit just as a token copy. And then 4 turns later, we get the original Clarion Spirit. So this is giving us a token copy of a creature if it's our second spell, giving us otherwise a copy of anything else. If it's a permanent, it'll be a token copy when it enters. But we're getting the spell we cast second, again, 4 turns later. And what's great about that is when we cast that, we are casting it, which means it's the first spell we've cast that turn. So any other spell we cast when we go to our first main phase will be our second spell, triggering OG, triggering Taigam, and any of our other spells and permanents that are in this section. So Taigam gives us a lot of value here, in addition to empowering our game plan several turns later. So yeah, pretty nice for us. Next we have a Final Fantasy card named, I believe, Alice Levelure. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that. I'm not a Final Fantasy guy. Let me know in the comments who this person is and what their deal is. They are, at least I can say, a 3/2 Legendary Elf Wizard for 2 and a white. They have partner with Alphanod Leveler. Alphanod, I don't know if that's their brother or their friend or whoever it may be, but it does have the partner with ability. Partner with is a variant of the partner ability, which we're not using the way you could build a commander deck with Alphanod and Alice both partnered in the command zone. But partner with means that when either of these creatures enters the battlefield, we get to search our library for the other one and put it in our hand. So essentially, Alice draws us Alphanod, which is a pretty sweet ability, being able to know that this creature, when we cast it, is going to replace itself in our hand with its buddy that is probably somehow synergistic with it. Yeah. But beyond that, this is a 3/2 with first strike that has a dual cast ability, which means the second spell we cast each turn costs 2 generic less to cast. So this is a better discount than we were even getting from Monk class's level 1 ability. Being able to cast like a 5-drop for just 3 mana, as long as it's our second spell during that turn, is very powerful. So Alice helps us do that. Cosmic Grand Zenith is next. This is 2 and a white for a 2/4 human soldier that says whenever you cast your second spell each turn, choose to either make 2 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens, or to put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. So we use the Cosmic Grand Zenith to great effect in this deck. We're going to be double spelling basically every turn after we've gotten out our commander. So every turn might be us adding 2 creatures to our battlefield just by casting our second spell. It might be putting a counter on every one of our creatures, including any soldiers we've already put in play. So Cosmic Grand Zenith, usually I like to choose the tokens side of it in this deck so that we get a very wide board, because late game, once we get to one of our Wincons, our finishers, having a wider board is likely to be better for us. But it doesn't hurt if we are looking at our opponents and seeing that they're making some pretty big creatures to say, well, we might want to just make all of our creatures a little bigger this time. We can always alternate between the 2 each turn. Pretty neat. Next up is Uthros Psionicist. This is another one of these cards, 2 and a blue for a 2/4 jellyfish scientist that makes the second spell we cast each turn cost 2 less to cast. I know it seems like we've got a lot of these effects in here, and we do, and it's worth it. Every time I've played this deck, having that kind of discount really helps us cast either our bigger spells second during the turn, or lets us be able to cast 2 spells at all, since we have a number of spells that are a little bit heavier on value, or on mana value, because they're heavier on, game-winning value. So yeah, these are powerful effects. And a 2/4 body for a 3-mana creature is totally fine, but it especially helps us be a little defensive since we're working toward a later in the game win. Next up, Wingblade Disciple. This is 2 and a blue for a 2/2 human monk with flying, with a Flurry ability. When we cast our second spell each turn, we make a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying. So this is exactly the same as our Clarion Spirit. It's a bird instead of a spirit rather, but it's still making a 1/1 flyer when we cast our second spell. So the only difference between these 2 creatures, other than their color and the types, of course, is that Clarion Spirit is a 2/2 for 2, Wingblade Disciple is a 2/2 flyer for 2. Both of them are fine in this deck, so might as well. Now, we actually get to see Alphanod Leveler. This is 3 and a blue for a 2/4 Elf Wizard partners with Alisei Leveler, and has Vigilance, so 2/4 Vigilance for 4, totally fine. That says whenever we cast our second spell each turn, we draw a card. So this is pretty great to be able to get out second. If we happen to draw Alisei, we cast it, it finds us Alphanod, and then it says the second spell we cast each turn costs 2 less to cast, so if we happen to have 1 in a blue after casting Alisei, we can immediately cast Alphanod, because it'll be our second spell, it'll get a discount from Alisei. We can cast it for just 2, we get a 2/4 Vigilance creature, and then that's great. Or doing it the opposite direction costs us more mana, casting Alphanod first, finding Alisei, and then casting Alisei. But if Alisei is our second spell that turn, then it will trigger Alphanod and we'll get to draw a card. Being able to draw a card every time we cast our second spell is pretty great, because that means we've had 2 cards leave our hand, and we're getting 1 back, so we're replacing our second spell every turn with Alphanod. That's pretty nice. Next we have another Battle for Baldur's Gate card. It's the Council of 4. 3, a white, and a blue for a 0/8, so a great defender. Legendary Human Noble that says whenever a player draws their second card during their turn, you draw a card. That is a player, and as long as it's during that player's turn, it means whenever we draw our second card, we draw another card. Whenever anyone else draws their second card during their turn, we draw a card. Great. And whenever a player casts their second spell during their turn, so it's not just us, it's any player who double spells, we make a 2/2 White Knight creature token. So more tokens for us, sounds great. Next we have the Legend of Yangchen from Avatar: The Last Airbender. This is a saga. The way sagas work, if you haven't seen them before, is when they first come in, they get a lore counter on them, and then they get a new lore counter at the start of each of your first main phases on your subsequent turns. Every time they get a lore counter, they trigger the ability that's linked to the number of lore counters on it. And normally, after that last ability has resolved, we would sacrifice the saga, but not so with the Legend of Yangchen, and you'll see how in a moment. So this is 3 in double white. For a saga, which Chapter 1 says, starting with you, each player chooses up to 1 permanent with mana value 3 or greater from among permanents your opponents control. Exile those permanents. So we would choose any permanent that we're able to choose, that is to say, something that is controlled by an opponent and is mana value 3 or greater. We are not targeting these, so it doesn't matter if they have hexproof or shroud or anything along those lines. We get to choose any of these permanents. Then we pass to the next opponent, and they get to choose one. They can choose the same one we did, and oftentimes, every player, in order to minimize the amount of damage that an effect like this does, will choose the same permanent. However, one of those opponents is going to be the controller of that permanent, so they may choose something else just to not have, themselves be the only one that loses something. Which means, oftentimes, we are incentivized to choose something on the playmat of the opponent to our left, because they know first that they're the one who's going to have something lost, so they get the first chance to choose someone else's playmat, which means that other opponent might choose to hit them again with a completely different permanent that they would exile, or to try and spread it around. All we know is that our stuff can't be hit because it's permanents our opponents control, and we can only hit things mana value 3 or greater, so only things that are pretty good. Yeah, so we're getting a little bit of good removal with this first chapter. The second chapter is, you may have target opponent draw 3 cards, and if you do, draw 3 cards. That's pretty great. A little bit of politicking right there, the ability to get some cards in hand and maybe help out the person who's the farthest behind, that seems great. And then the last chapter is, exile the saga and return it to the battlefield transformed under your control. And we get Avatar Yangchen. Love this art for Avatar Yangchen. This is a 4/5 flying legendary avatar that says whenever you cast your second spell each turn, airbend up to 1 other target non-land permanent. Airbending something means exiling it, and its owner has permission to cast it for 2 generic mana rather than its mana cost while it's exiled. They still have to follow timing restrictions though. So if we airbend a creature, that creature we know is not coming back until its controller's main phases, unless they have a way to cast it at flash speed. So pretty nice for us. Repeatable removal here, but also it doesn't say airbend up to 1 target non-land permanent and opponent controls. We can hit our own things with this, which gives us the ability to say, maybe we want to airbend our Council of 4 and recast it. That wouldn't give us triggers off of it, but maybe we have a bunch of other second spell triggers, so that we recast Council of 4 for 2 generic rather than just 5 mana. So Legend of Yangchen is very nice for us in giving us that option to airbend our own stuff, in addition to the idea of being able to just remove something, albeit non-permanently, from an opponent's playmat every turn cycle whenever we cast our second spell. It's also worth noting that we're playing a blink deck, and this is a double-faced card. Double-faced cards, when they are blinked, re-enter the battlefield if they can, with their front face up. And when I say when they can, I don't mean some of them might enter with their back face up. What I mean is some double-faced cards are non-permanent spells on their front face, so a sorcery or an instant can't enter the battlefield at all. So not relevant for our deck, but if we were to blink something that was like a land on the back and a sorcery on the front, and we blink that land somehow, it would go to exile and it just wouldn't return because sorceries can't enter the battlefield. But again, not relevant for this, just wanted to make mention of it. We can, with one of our blink effects, maybe just OG, blink Avatar Yangchen. And if we do, it will return to the battlefield as the Legend of Yangchen and start the process all over again. We'll get to exile something, next turn, maybe draw some cards, and the turn after that, it will become Avatar Yangchen again. So that is a nice way for us to protect Avatar Yangchen if we expect that there might be a board wipe coming. We just turn her back into a saga for a couple of turns. Or if we just want to be able to get more value out of removal on the front side, we're able to do that here as well. Pretty good. Next is Storm of Saruman. This is from the Lord of the Rings set, 4 and double blue for an enchantment with ward 3, so it protects itself, that says whenever you cast your second spell each turn, copy it, except the copy is a legendary. You may choose new targets for the copy. Pretty self-explanatory, a little bit like Taigam, except that we don't lose the original to it being suspended, we get to keep it. And if our second spell happens to be a legend, the copy we make of it isn't legendary, which is pretty sweet for us. You know, if we were able to get that second spell in and maybe it's a second Council of 4, for example, that seems pretty nice to me. Or a second Taigam, that would be fine too, yeah. Last in this section is Tomb of Horrors Adventurer. This is 5 and a blue for a 4/4 elf monk that says when this creature enters, you take the initiative. We will talk about what that means in just a moment. And it says whenever you cast your second spell each turn, copy it. So we're getting that Storm of Saruman or Taigam sort of effect already, except that Storm of Saruman makes that copy non-legendary and Tomb of Horrors Adventurer does not. It also says if you've completed a dungeon, copy that spell twice instead, and you can choose new targets for the copies. So basically, every time we cast our second spell, we get a copy of it, and if we've completed a dungeon, we get 2 copies of it instead. That's pretty great. Now, but what is a dungeon? And what is this initiative? Well, we're going to talk about it. So let's take a look at our token section here in Moxfield and look at the initiative. This is the initiative. It is a status, kind of like the monarchy, if you're familiar with You Become the Monarch effects, that a player has. That player, when they take the initiative, will venture into the Undercity. Venture into the Undercity means they enter a dungeon, which is called the Undercity, and it is this dungeon. We'll talk about that in a moment. When you have the initiative, rather when you take it, and at the start of your upkeep, if you still have the initiative, you venture into the Undercity. So you get to keep going in to this dungeon and delving deeper every time. The way you gain the initiative is either by having a permanent enter that says you take the initiative, or by dealing combat damage to a player that has the initiative. So you can take it from a player with the initiative by attacking and doing combat damage to them. So either you take it with one of your permanents, like our Tomb of Horrors Adventurer, which we can blink to retake the initiative because it says when it enters, take the initiative, without us having to actually attack another player. Or we could, let's say we take the initiative, somebody takes it from us by doing combat damage to us, we go to our next turn, attack them, take it back, then blink our Tomb of Horrors Adventurer to take the initiative again. That means we will venture into the Undercity, both when we took the initiative from our opponent and when we took the initiative from our Tomb of Horrors Adventurer re-entering the battlefield. It will make a little more sense when you play it, just go with it. What it actually means to venture into the Undercity, which is the benefit of taking the initiative or of having it and holding it until the beginning of your upkeep to get a trigger there, is this. You have this dungeon. You will put a little player marker on the first room, which is the secret entrance, and you'll get its effect, which is Lay of the Land. Search your library for a basic land, reveal it, put it in your hand, and shuffle. So you get to draw a land, essentially, a basic. That's pretty good. Every time you venture into the Undercity after that, you get to choose a path that you follow through it. You have to go to the next room. You can't stay in the same room you're in. You can't go backwards, and you can't go sideways. You have to go down to the next room, or to a room that the room you're in has one of these little arrows that takes you to. So if you start at the secret entrance and you go to the forge, you cannot next go to the stash. You've got to go to either the arena or the trap. Arena will take you to the catacombs or archives, and eventually you get to the Throne of the Dead 3, and you get a very powerful effect. I'm not going to read all of these, but it's pretty valuable to go through every time. And you can get everything you need out of each venture pretty easily. There's a lot of good value here, which is why, even though that's the only card in our deck, Tomb of Horrors Adventurer, that lets us venture into the Undercity, it can really change the way the game plays, and it's a lot of fun. And when you complete this dungeon, that means the next time you venture into the Undercity, whether it's because you kept the initiative until your upkeep, or you've taken the initiative again, somehow, you will just go back to the first room and start the process all over again. Pretty neat. So that is how the initiative works. We're going to go back up to our second spell section and our Tomb of Horrors adventure. We'll just keep talking about that. So like I said, when it enters, we take the initiative. If we flicker this, we will take the initiative back again each time. When we cast our second spell each turn, we make a copy of it, and if we've completed a dungeon, which in this deck will be the Undercity, then we get to copy that spell twice instead. Pretty good. Lots of value here in our second spell creatures. So let's move on to our next section, which is our blink section. 12 more cards that give us ways to blink our permanents beyond just using OG, even though it's nice to be able to use OG for it. Airbender Ascension is the first one. This is 1 and a white for an enchantment that says whenever this enchantment enters, airbend up to one target creature. Like I mentioned before with the Legend of Yangchen, this does not have to be an opponent's creature. We can airbend one of our own creatures in order to recast it, either that same turn or a later turn, and protect it in the meantime, and just sort of rebuy its enters triggers. That's pretty nice for us, but we can also just get rid of something that an opponent has, and even if we're just getting rid of it temporarily, that means they can't use it for now, it can't block, and sometimes, opponents might say, oh, you airbend my commander? I'm going to put it back in the command zone because I'd rather cast it with mana based on its casting cost than cast it using airbending. That doesn't happen that often, but some commanders care about how much mana you spend to cast them. Some commanders have an X in their casting cost and come in with that many 1/1 counters, and so forth. So there are some fun things we can do with Airbender Ascension that force opponents to take their airbend commander and put it back in the command zone. But usually this is us temporarily removing an opponent's creature, or sometimes one of our own creatures, so that we can recast it and thereby get a second spell. And whenever whenever a creature we control enters, we put a quest counter on this enchantment. Quest counters don't have an inherent mechanical meaning, they're just used by this card. So every time we have any creature enter, which is very easy for us to do in this deck because we don't just have creatures entering when we cast them, we have creatures entering when they are tokens being created, and when we flicker our creatures, they are leaving and re-entering, which will trigger Airbender Ascension. So it's easy for us to get quite a few quest counters on Airbender Ascension quickly. And at the beginning of your end step, if Airbender Ascension has 4 or more quest counters on it, we exile up to one target creature we control and return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So we get a free end step flicker once we've gotten 4 or more quest counters on Airbender Ascension, and we get that every turn. So even more quest counters will be going on this, which aren't really relevant anymore past that point. But more importantly, we're getting to take all of our creatures that we wanted to build up, we wanted to get more value out of, and we get even more value out of them at our end step. Next is Disorder in the Court. X, a white and a blue for an instant that says exile X target creatures, then investigate X times. To investigate means to make a clue token, an artifact that if we pay 2 and sacrifice it, we draw a card. So we exile X creatures, investigate that many times, and return those exiled cards to the battlefield, tapped, under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. Disorder in the Court is very powerful. This can be a protection spell for us. We can exile our creatures, knowing that they're not going to come back until the next end step, and even though they come back in tapped, we at least saved them from a board wipe or a removal effect. What I like to call exiling something and returning it not immediately, but at the beginning of the next end step, I like to call that a slow flicker, because they don't immediately come back, but they do come back pretty soon. So Disorder in the Court is a great way for us to prevent our creatures from dying, or from being board wiped, being exiled, from being bounced, being humbled, whatever it may be that our opponents want us to do to them. We can use Disorder in the Court to protect our stuff. However, it's also a powerful removal effect, because it does not say exile X target creatures you control. So if we hit our opponent's stuff with this, not only are we getting rid of their creatures for now so that they don't provide our opponents any utility or any value and can't block, when those creatures come back in, they're coming back in at the end step and they're coming tapped. Which means if we hit opponent A's creatures during opponent A's turn, those creatures are all going to come back in during their end step, and they're going to be tapped until it's opponent A's next turn, at the start of the next turn cycle. So that's a great way to ensure that we and opponents B and C can all attack opponent A without having to worry about those creatures being able to block. This is a great thing for us to do if we want to mess up combat between two other players, for example. Maybe opponent A is attacking opponent B, and we say, I think opponent B would take a lot of damage if they couldn't block, so we just Disorder in the Court to remove opponent B's blocking creatures without even consulting opponent A. Or we can tell opponent A, look, maybe you want to attack them, and I can remove their blockers. If you do that, maybe we make a deal. Maybe you will leave me alone for 2 turn cycles, something along those lines. So we can use this politically, we can use this strategically, we can use it on our own creatures, on our opponent's creatures, and all of that is just about blinking things, giving that slow flicker effect. None of that touches the fact that, in addition, whatever X was, we get that many clue tokens. So we're going to get a little bit of banked draw effect for ourselves whenever we need to crack those clues and get some extra cards. In this deck, we are not hurting for ways to draw cards, but having some clues sitting around doesn't hurt us at all. Next, we have Momentary Blink. This is a classic. 1 and a white for an instant, exile target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. Just blink something. And then we can flash it back for 3 and a blue. So Momentary Blink is actually 2 spells. It's itself, and then it's its flashback self, so that we have the ability to not just blink something on a different turn, but maybe trigger a second spell without having to use a card from our hand, since we've got Momentary Blink in our graveyard waiting for us to cast it from there. Nice. Recursion in that way is really helpful in a deck that cares about the number of spells you're casting every turn. Waterbender's Restoration is next. This is double blue for an instant, a lesson, not relevant for us, but it's nice to know we're learning lessons, that says, as an additional cost to cast the spell, Waterbend for X generic mana. Waterbending means pay this amount of mana, but you can also tap artifacts and or creatures, and each one you tap pays 1 generic mana for this. So what does it do? It says, exile X target creatures you control, return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So slow flicker X creatures you control. That's pretty good, especially because the X that we have to pay as an additional cost can be paid by tapping creatures, which means if we are exiling some creatures that we control and they are all untapped, we just tap them, each one of them, to pay the one for itself for the waterbending cost. If we want to exile and flicker 5 creatures, we just tap those 5 creatures, each of which pays for the waterbending cost, and all we had to pay was the double blue. If we need to do that with 15 of our creatures, we tap all of them, and we still just paid double blue. It's pretty nice. And the fact that we can do this at instant speed means we can use this as protection for our creatures if, again, they're being board wiped, or threatening with a board wipe, or an exile, or a bounce, or anything along those lines. As well as we can use this to muck up combat. If we have a bunch of creatures that are untapped and blocking our opponent's creatures when they are attacking us, as long as those opponent's creatures don't have trample, it doesn't matter if our creatures get flickered before combat damage is dealt, the creatures that are attacking are still blocked. So we flicker our creatures, they leave, we've still gotten the value out of them blocking, and we're going to get more value when they re-enter because they're the kind of creatures that are in our deck. They give us value when they come in. So yeah, Waterbender's Restoration is a nice way to protect our stuff, or just get an extra flicker if we need to. Next we have Soul Herder. 1 a white and a blue for a 1/1 spirit that says whenever a creature is exiled from the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on this creature. This counts every time we exile something in order to flicker it, because it doesn't say exiled from the battlefield and remains in exile. As long as it left the battlefield and went to exile from the battlefield, then it counts for this triggered ability, and we're able to get that value from it. So we get a counter on the Soul Herder, and that's pretty good. But we also get counters on the Soul Herder when something else happens. When someone casts an Oblivion Ring and exiles something. When somebody casts a Farewell, would not help because Soul Herder is going to get exiled as well. But my point is, any other player who wants to exile something, as long as what they're exiling is a creature and they're exiling it from the battlefield, our Soul Herder is going to see that. It doesn't have to necessarily involve us and our stuff, our spells. And at the beginning of our end step, we may exile another target creature we control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. We have an option to flicker something, which will also trigger its first ability and put another counter on it. So a little bit of extra value for us at the end step, the same as we are getting from Airbender Ascension, but it also puts a counter on the Soul Herder. Pretty nice. Next up is Touch the Spirit Realm. I mentioned Oblivion Rings. This is 2 and a white for an enchantment that says when it enters, exile up to 1 target artifact or creature until this leaves the battlefield. So we can use this just to remove something, lock down a creature or an artifact, and unless our opponent, who controlled that creature or artifact, is able to remove Touch the Spirit Realm, it's going to stay gone. And that's fine for us. But it also has a channel ability. For 1 and a white, and to discard this card from our hand, we can exile an artifact or creature and then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So slow flicker an artifact or creature. That's pretty good. It's especially nice because channeling is not casting a spell, it's activating an ability on a card. So if we channel Touch the Spirit Realm, we are not casting a spell, so it's not going to cause us to, have cast our second spell for the turn. But it is something we can use, like I mentioned, with any slow flicker effect to protect our own creatures from being board wiped, to get an extra flicker whenever we need it. We can use this because it does not say exile target artifact or creature you control. We can use this to not get rid of, not lock down an artifact or creature, which costs 3 mana and has to be at sorcery speed on our turn, but at instant speed, we can just take an attacking creature out of combat because we exile it and it won't come back till the end step. Maybe that creature has a bunch of enchantments on it, a bunch of auras or some equipment, or even just a bunch of counters on it that are making it very powerful. All of those are going to fall off. The auras will go to the graveyard, the equipment are going to stay on the battlefield but fall off, and when that creature comes back, none of its counters are going to remain on it. We can reset a creature that way. Being able to use this kind of effect on an artifact or creature that we don't control is very powerful, in addition to all of the abilities that we can use it for on our own stuff. Great. Oh, did I mention, if we exile an artifact and that artifact taps for mana, when it comes back, we can tap it for mana right away. I mean, we won't be able to use that mana except during that end step and then, before our next turn when everything else untaps, but we have access to it. So yeah. Nice. I really like Touch the Spirit Realm. Next we have All Fates Stalker. This is 3 and a white for a 2/3 Drix Assassin from Edge of Eternities. It says when it enters, exile up to 1 target non-assassin creature until this creature leaves the battlefield. So this is another O-Ring effect. It lets us lock down a creature that, as long as that creature isn't an assassin, it's going to stay under the All Fates Stalker until the Stalker leaves the battlefield. Which is pretty nice for us, because it allows us to Oblivion Ring something, and it doesn't even have to be an opponent's creature. It doesn't say it does. It can be one of our creatures. And then we flicker the Stalker, and whatever was exiled under the Stalker will come back into play. If it was one of our creatures, that's great. We get an enters trigger from it. And then the Stalker will re-enter play since we flickered it, and we get to exile something else. We can also do this to get rid of, let's say, a creature that an opponent controls until a scarier creature comes in. And then we say, I would rather get rid of that Galta than this Spirited Companion that we got rid of the first time. Spirited Companion's a terrible example. Maybe it's I can only think of good creatures. This is not great. Anyway, it's a Grizzly Bears. We'll get rid of your Grizzly Bears. Oh no, now you have a Galta. I'm gonna flicker the All Fates Stalker, giving you back your Grizzly Bears, and now the Stalker re-enters, and we get rid of Galta. Great. That seems like a good plan. It's also fun to be able to do this with someone's commander, because they don't know when we're going to flicker the Stalker or if they're going to be able to kill it necessarily. So if we exile their commander will go back to the command zone probably so that they can recast it, and now there's nothing exiled under the Allfate Stalker, and we just flicker it and we exile something else. Maybe a different commander or a different creature, or maybe that same commander again once they've recast it. Obviously we don't want to lock someone out of the game and be a jerk to them that way, unless that's the only way we can win, I guess, but it's a possibility for us in Commander that is very different from playing this in Limited and in Constructed, like a 60 card Constructed, because being able to move your commander out from under the Stalker and put it back in the command zone and recast it gives our deck a chance to use the Stalker multiple times to keep removing commanders, and that's pretty great. And all of that is true even if Allfate Stalker didn't have the warp cost of 1 and a white. Warp is an alternate casting cost, which means rather than pay 3 and a white, we can pay 1 and a white, the Allfate Stalker will enter, it will get its interest trigger, and then at the end step, we exile it, and we can cast it from exile on a later turn for its regular cost. So that means we get a second bite at the apple, sort of a pre-bite at the apple for at least that first turn. Which means the way this normally plays out is you use its warp ability to either remove an opponent's threat or more likely their blocker so that you can swing in and hurt them, and then they'll get it back during their turn at our end step, and we can replay the Stalker next turn to shut down one of their things more permanently. Or we can use the Stalker to exile one of our things with warp, and then at the end of turn, the Stalker will leave and go to exile thanks to the delayed warp trigger, and our thing will come back. So it sort of is a built-in slow flicker for one of our own things. In this deck, it can do all of that, everything I've mentioned so far, and one more fun thing. Because if the Allfate Stalker gets warped in, and then we flicker it while it's warped in, it will leave the battlefield and re-enter. That's what flickering looks like. And it re-enters as a new game object, which means the fact that the original Allfate Stalker was warped in has nothing to do with the Allfate Stalker that has re-entered the battlefield thanks to being flickered. So we will go to our end step, and the delayed trigger will go off and look for the original Allfate Stalker, but since we flickered it, the one that we have in play is a new game object. The delayed trigger won't be able to find it, and so it will just stay in play. So as long as we warped this in and then flickered it, it's like we only paid 2 mana for it, and we got it to stay in play as though we'd paid 4 mana for it. So this is in our later section that I've called cheats, because we can use flickering to cheat the warp costs and cheat creatures in thanks to them. So lots of fun we can do with this card. It seems like there's not much to it, but it has a lot of play, especially in a deck like ours. You again? Next up is a classic in Blink decks, and in a lot of decks, it's Resto Angel. Restoration Angel is 3 and a white for a 3/4 angel with flash and flying. So the ability to flash this in as a sudden blocker, very good. But also, when it enters, we can exile a non-angel creature we control, then return it to the battlefield under our control. So we can flicker a non-angel. So we can do that on an opponent's turn, or during our combat at flash speed, to protect our things. That's what Restoration Angel's normal play pattern looks like, being able to flash it in and get to save one of our non-angel creatures. And in our deck, if we have a way to flicker Restoration Angel, it will flicker, come back in whenever that flicker effect brings it back in, either immediately or at the end step, and we'll get to flicker something else thanks to its interest trigger right away. So we can get multiple different triggers by chaining together our flicker effects. Resto Angel is just very powerful even for decks not like ours, but in ours we can do a lot more with it. We've seen the Legend of Yangchen. We're able to not exactly flicker things with it, but with the backside airbending things gives us a little bit of a flicker type effect to rebuy our triggers. Deadeye Navigator is next. This card is so good in Blink decks. 4 and double blue for a 5/5 spirit with Soul Bond. Soul Bond says you may pair this creature with another unpaired creature when either enters, and they remain paired for as long as you control both of them. So the idea is, when the Deadeye Navigator is not paired with a creature, then we can pair it with a creature, and now those creatures are paired for as long as they're both in play. So either when this enters, we can pair it with something that's already in play, or we can choose not to, and something else enters, and every time anything else enters, we can choose to pair it with the navigator when that thing enters. So yeah, once they're paired though, as long as they are paired together, as long as this is paired with another creature, both it and that other creature have pay 1 and a blue and exile this creature, then return it to the battlefield under your control. Very, very powerful effect here, because what this does is it lets us not just flicker the Deadeye Navigator or the other creature that it's paired with, but by doing so, one of those creatures has left the battlefield, so those creatures are no longer paired. So we can use this to reset the Navigator and pair it with something else, either by flickering the Navigator itself and thereby pairing it with something else that's already in play, or by flickering the other creature that it's paired with, so that now that new creature re-enters, or that creature will re-enter the battlefield, and we just choose not to pair it with the Navigator, so that the next thing we cast, we can pair with the Navigator if we wish to. So yeah, very cool play with this, and the ability to repeatedly flicker things is really nice. It's also the case that, I just want to make mention of this, our deck is not trying to steal our opponent's stuff, but Deadeye Navigator, unlike most of our blink effects, says exile this creature, then return it to the battlefield under your control. It doesn't say under its owner's control, as most of our other flicker effects say. So if we have some way for an opponent to give us one of their things, even temporarily, and we choose to use Deadeye Navigator to pair with that creature and then flicker it, it will flicker and come back under our control, irrespective of what other effect it may have had that put it under our control in the first place. If it was some kind of temporary effect, now it's not temporary anymore. That thing is just, we control it for the rest of the game. So yeah, we are again not trying to steal things with this blink deck, but we do have the ability to do so with Deadeye Navigator if we happen upon a temporary way of controlling our opponent's creatures. So yeah. Next up we have Pegasus Guardian. This is an adventure creature. The way this works is, it is a creature named Pegasus Guardian for 5 and a white. That is a 3/3 Pegasus that flies and says at the beginning of your end step, if a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn, create a 1/1 white Pegasus creature token with flying. So this makes us a 1/1 flyer, another one of those, during each end step when we had something leave the battlefield, any of our permanents, whether it's us cracking a Wayfarer's Bauble or most likely flickering one of our creatures, we're going to be able to get a free 1/1 Pegasus at the end of turn thanks to this Guardian, which is pretty sweet. In addition, however, it has an instant speed adventure built into it. So the way this works is, when this card is in your hand, you can either play the Guardian, which means paying 5 and a white and getting a 3/3 flyer, and then you just ignore the adventure. Or you can cast the adventure, and once it resolves, the card goes to exile, and you can cast the creature half of it from exile. You have permission to do so. It doesn't even have to be on a later turn the way that it would with Warp. So kind of a similar play pattern to Warp, but rather than getting the creature for one turn and then being able to cast it from exile on a later turn, you get a non-creature spell, and then once that resolves, from exile you can cast the creature half either that same turn or a later one. And that adventure is good for our deck. Rescue the Foal is 1 and a white for an instant that says exile target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So another 2 mana, instant speed, regular flicker effect. So if you've got 8 mana, or a way to discount your second spell, you can cast Rescue the Foal to blink something, then cast Pegasus Guardian that same turn, and since if you blinked something, a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn, at the end step, you'll make that 1/1 white Pegasus creature token. So yeah, this gives us a lot of repeated value and some instant speed value before we get the Pegasus out. Great. Last in this section is our 1 Planeswalker. This is the Eternal Wanderer from All Will Be One. 4 and double white gives us a 5 loyalty legendary Planeswalker with no subtype, because this is the Wandering Emperor. We do not know her name because that's how they do things on Kamigawa. The Eternal Wanderer has a static ability that says no more than 1 creature can attack the Eternal Wanderer each combat. So no one is ever going to have multiple creatures swinging at our Wanderer during the same combat, which means it's very easy for us to block, especially chump block, and protect the Wanderer. So the Eternal Wanderer's +1 ability is exile up to 1 target artifact or creature, doesn't say that you control, Return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of that player's next end step. This is a little different than some of the other slow flicker effects we've seen. Not only does it say artifact or creature rather than just creature, and not only does it not say that you control, it says return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of that player's next end step. So if the turn order is us, then opponent A, opponent B, and opponent C, if we choose to exile a creature controlled by opponent C, they're not going to get it back until their next end step. Not the next end step, their next end step. So this is a very powerful way to remove a creature and just get rid of it for quite a while. It's not permanent, of course, but that's fine. Like, being able to take it out for a long time is usually pretty sweet. And sometimes a player, if we hit their commander with this, will say, no, I can't wait for that. I need my commander on my next turn. I can't wait till the end of my next turn. So they might choose, if we hit their commander with this, to put their commander in the command zone and recast it during their turn so that they can use it for the second half of their turn somehow, which means we've gotten a lot more value out of it. So this is great removal, like I'm mentioning, but of course we can hit our own things with this if we want to and get that sweet, sweet blink value like the rest of our deck wants us to get. Next up is a 0 mana or a 0 loyalty ability that just makes a 2/2 white samurai creature token with double strike. A double striking 2/2 for no cost of loyalty, that's pretty sweet. A great thing for us to do with the Eternal Wanderer, especially if we're working toward our end game when we want to have a lot of creatures that either fly in or do some other thing that will win us the game. But anytime we don't need that, if we just need to blink something or remove something with this blink effect, that's pretty good too. And -4 is for each player, choose a creature that player controls, and each player sacrifices all creatures they control not chosen this way. This is a board wipe. This is just one of our 2 board wipes in the deck. If we need to get creatures gone, this is a way to do it. It's especially nice since this doesn't cost mana, it only costs loyalty. And we can do it that same turn the Eternal Wanderer comes in. So maybe what we do is we cast the Eternal Wanderer, and if we have the mana for it, we do it this turn, or we do this next turn, where we cast Waterbender's Restoration, or Disorder in the Court, and blink out our entire board. Then, -4 the Eternal Wanderer, and everyone else at the table will now have only a single creature left in play. Then in our end step, we get all of our creatures back, they get all of their triggers for coming back in. Even if it was Disorder in the Court and all of our creatures are tapped, none of our opponents have more than one creature, and because they only have one creature, that's the only creature they're going to be able to use to attack the Eternal Wanderer if the Wanderer's still in play. So great, we're all set. Pretty good. That covers our blink section, and I mentioned our cheats section. I just like to go through and take a look at them. We've seen the All Fate Stalker. All of these cards are from Edge of Eternities and all have the Warp ability, so we'll be able to talk about them similarly. There are other ways to cheat cards in with a blink deck, but these are the ones that I chose for this one. So Halia, Guided by Light, is very good for our deck. This is a 3/3 legendary human soldier for 2 and a white that says whenever she or another creature or artifact you control enters, gain 1 life. So either she comes in, any of our other creatures comes in, whether it's a token, whether it's coming in because we cast it or we blinked it, whatever it may be, or any artifacts we control coming in. All of those clues that came in from Disorder in the Court, maybe us just casting a Soul Ring. Any of those things gains us a life, and like I mentioned in the heart of the deck, a little bit of life is nothing to sneeze at. It can really help us out by the end of the game, because especially at the beginning of our end step, Halia has us draw a card if we've gained 3 or more life this turn. This is very easy for us to do, not just because of Halia's own trigger, but because OG. When OG enters, we scry 2 and gain 2 life. If OG comes in while Halia is already in play, we will gain 3 life, 2 from OG and 1 from OG coming in, thanks to Halia. Then we go to our end step, and if Halia is still in play, we draw a card. Great. Getting that extra card is awesome for us, especially since we will have just scryed 2 with OG entering. And maybe all of this is happening because we've cast our second spell that turn, and OG is what we chose to flicker. So yeah, very nice synergies for us here. Halia often looks like us drawing an extra card every turn. Not always, not every single turn, but oftentimes. If we're casting 2 creature spells and flickering one of our creatures with OG, then that's probably 3 creatures entering, so that's at the minimum 3 life that we've gained from Halia, and therefore a card at the end of turn. And of course, we can warp Halia in. Both to do the cheat thing, where we warp her in, cast another spell, flicker her with OG since we cast a second spell, and now she comes in and she's going to stay in play rather than be exiled with the delayed trigger from Warp, since she's a new game object. But also, we will have gained a life for her entering, and a life for her re-entering, since she entered twice. And because she will have re-entered before our second spell resolved, if that second spell enters and it's a creature or artifact, then we get our third life, and we're going to be able to go to our end step and draw a card off of her. So yeah, Halia is very nice for us, even if all we're doing with her is using her as a 1 mana way of getting 2 spells during the turn. So just like with the adventure that we've seen before, we use this as a way to cast a spell, and then on a later turn cast a second spell if we're not going to use the cheaty thing with her. So that's 2 spells on the same card that we're getting to count toward each of our turns. How many spells have you cast? Did you cast a second spell? It doesn't really matter if our second spell is going to go away at the end of turn, or our second spell gives us a creature that goes away at the end of turn. We still get our value from OG and all of our other cards that care about us double spelling. We've seen the All-Fate Stalker. Starfield Vocalist is next. This is 3 and a blue for a 3/4 human bard with Warp for 1 and a blue, so helps out in all those ways I just mentioned with Halia for our cheating and for our multi-spelling with Warp. But what does the Vocalist actually give us? Well, it says, if a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Starfield Vocalist is our Panharmonicon. It doesn't even limit itself to creatures and artifacts. Any enters triggers, whether it's a card that we have that says when this creature enters or this permanent enters, or it says when you have something else enter, like with Halia. Halia triggers off of herself, any creature entering or any artifact entering. Starfield Vocalist will double any of those triggers. Any trigger that's an interest trigger for our permanents, we get it twice. Great. Huge amount of value. It just doubles all of our power in this deck, basically. Not like creature power, but the value that we get from our stuff. Excellent. Finally, we have Anti-Causal Vestige. This is an Eldrazi. A little weird thing going on here. There, that's better. It's a 6 mana Eldrazi. It's a 7/5 creature that says, when this creature leaves the battlefield, we draw a card, and then we can put a permanent card with mana value less than or equal to the number of lands we control from our hand onto the battlefield tapped. Seems good. So if this leaves the battlefield, whether it dies, whether it's exiled, or most importantly for us, when we flicker it, we will get the leaves the battlefield trigger, which draws us a card and lets us put any permanent from our hand into play as long as that permanent doesn't have a mana value greater than the number of lands we control. Great. Whatever we're putting in play will come in tapped, but that's fine with us. Because you know what has a mana value of 0? Land cards. So this is actually a ramp effect for us as well, if we happen to have drawn a card, whether it's this card that we drew from the Vestige leaving or some other card that we just happen to have gotten in our hand. If we've already made our land drop for that turn and we have another land in hand, we might as well put it into play and essentially have gotten a free rampant growth effect, getting a land into play tapped. But if it's a creature or some other permanent that we want to get into play, maybe we don't care about it coming in tapped because it'll come in and we'll get triggers like Halia's triggers, or any of the triggers that are built onto that card that maybe we double with Starfield Vocalist. Whatever it may be, Anti-Causal Vestige gives us a chance to get those triggers without having to cast that spell, which means we didn't cast a spell to put it into play, but we at least got the Anti-Causal Vestige to leave the battlefield, which means we probably cast another spell, either a flicker effect or a effect that triggered OG to give us that flicker. So yeah, pretty good. And then this comes back in, and it's a 7/5 that's ready to do this all over for us again. And it has Warp for 4 generic mana, meaning the normal play pattern for this is we warp it in, we let it go to the end step and let it exile itself so that it will leave the battlefield and get this trigger, and then we cast it again on a later turn. But what we want to do is just cheat it in here. We want to cast it for 4. We want to cast something else, thereby triggering OG, flickering the Anti-Causal Vestige, and not just getting its leaves the battlefield trigger, but bringing it back in and making it so it's not going to warp away at the end of turn, and we've got a 7/5 creature that we're able to get more and more and more value from every time we continually flicker it. Pretty great. And that is all the cards that I think of as the core of our game plan. We have plenty of other cards in this deck that I want us to go over, but oh wait, hey, did you just like the video? Nice, thank you. I'm just kidding, you don't have to like the video if you don't feel like it. I appreciate you watching either way. Thank you for being here. Anyway, let's keep going. Before we go into our supplemental categories for the deck, I want to look at these support categories. We have a lot of ways of drawing cards, so let's start by talking about our card advantage section. As usual, I have tagged this as draw. It doesn't mean necessarily that all these cards draw as a card, like the draw a card action. They just give us access to more cards. So for example, we have Cloud of Fairies first. This is 1 and a blue for a 1/1 fairy with flying that says when it enters, untap up to 2 lands. This is really the effect we want from Cloud of Fairies in this deck. We want to be able to flicker it by casting our second spell and rebate ourselves 2 mana by untapping 2 lands. That's pretty strong for us. But it's in this section because we can cycle it for 2. If we don't need it, while it's in our hand, we pay 2, discard it, and draw a card. Usually not a use for it that we're using, but it's nice to be able to, if this is the best thing for us to do when we're flickering things, we flicker this and untap a couple of lands. Pretty good. Disorder in the Court can make us a bunch of clue tokens. That helps us draw cards. Next up is Dour Port Mage. This is 1 and a blue for a 1/3 frog wizard that says whenever 1 or more other creatures you control leave the battlefield without dying, draw a card. That means anytime we flicker something, it's going to exile, which is to say it's leaving the battlefield, but it isn't dying, so we're drawing a card. That is 1 or more other creatures. So if we have multiple things get flickered at the same time, we'll only get 1 trigger from the mage. And obviously, it says other creatures, so it doesn't count the mage itself. But if, for example, we were to want to flicker one of our creatures that gains us life when it enters, well, we're also going to draw a card when it leaves, and then it'll come back, and we'll get to gain that life. Pretty good. But we can also use the mage to protect our creatures. 1 and a blue and tap lets us return another target creature we control to its owner's hand. So if an opponent wants to target OG with a Path to Exile, let's say, we can activate the Dour Port Mage, bounce OG to our hand, and because they're leaving the battlefield without dying, we're going to get to draw a card as well, and then we can replay OG on our next turn. We can also use this bounce effect not to protect our creatures, but just to rebuy their interest triggers. If we want to spend 2 and draw a card, and then spend the cost of that creature again, that's fine for us to do as well. Great. Next up is Extraordinary Journey, which gives us kind of values similar to the Port Mage. Double X and double blue for an enchantment that says when it enters, we exile up to X target creatures, and for each of those cards, its owner may play it for as long as it remains exiled. This is kind of airbending, but rather than those cards going to exile and they can be recast for 2 generic mana rather than their casting cost, they just have to play their casting cost. So this lets us exile any of our creatures that we're willing to rebuy, or any opponent's creatures as well. Just get rid of them, and they can recast them if they want. We've essentially bounced them, except that they are in exile rather than in that opponent's hand. So yeah, a pretty nice effect for us here. But we can also make X equal 0, and we'll just cast this for double blue. And we still get its second effect, which is whenever 1 or more non-token creatures enter. If 1 or more of them entered from exile or was cast from exile, we draw a card, but only once each turn. What's nice about this is it means once each turn, we're probably going to draw an extra card because we're going to have flickered something, meaning we're going to have at least 1 creature enter from exile. But this works on our opponent's turns as well, and it doesn't say whenever 1 or more non-token creatures you control enter. So if our opponent's creatures are coming in from exile, maybe because we exiled them with the first half of Extraordinary Journey, then we're going to get to draw a card when any of those come in, as long as it's, all together. And if they cast only one of those creatures this turn and another of those creatures on their next turn, we're going to get a draw each of those times. Nice. Next is the Mind Stone. Really more of a mana rock. This is 2 generic mana for an artifact that taps for a colorless, but we can also pay 1, tap, and sack it to draw a card. We cash this in when we need a card, not something that usually happens in this deck because we have so much card advantage, but it's nice to be able to have the option for us in case we need it. Usually, though, this is a 2 mana untapped mana rock, and that's what we're looking for in this deck. We've seen Monk class. Its level 3 ability gives us access to more cards every time we are willing to every time we go to our upkeep, we exile the top card of our library, and then we can cast those cards as long as they're not the first card we cast during each of our turns. 1 and a white gives us Wall of Omens. This is a 0/4 wall with Defender that enters and draws us a card. Great. There's a couple of different cards that we could play, like Helpful Hunter or Spirited Companion, that are all like 1 and a white creatures that draw us a card when they enter. I chose Wall of Omens because I wanted us to have something that was more of a defensive card rather than just a 1/1, which is not defending us very well or really attacking that well. Those cards would be great for attacking later on with one of our big finisher cards. Wall of Omens not so much because it's a defender, but it's solid for us for the rest of the game. It just doesn't help us in the very last moment of it, and that's pretty good too. Watcher for Tomorrow is next. This card is really cool. 1 and a blue gives us a 2/1 wizard, or human wizard, that enters tapped, and when it leaves the battlefield, we put the exiled card into its owner's hand. But what exiled card? Well, it has Hideaway 4, which means when it enters, we look at the top 4 cards of our library, exile one of them face down under the Watcher, and put the rest on the bottom in a random order. So this comes in, and it's a 2/1 creature that we look at the top 4, stick a card under it, put the other ones on the bottom of our library. It comes in tapped, and then if we flicker it, it will leave the battlefield, put that card that we had exiled under it into our hand, and repeat the process. So Watcher for Tomorrow, not a very good attacker or blocker, but a great way for us to continually get card selection and a card in hand every time we flicker it. So this is an excellent flicker target for us that filters through our deck and gives us what we're looking for most in that moment. I think it's just a cool effect as well. Next up, we have Ether Channeler. This is 2 and a blue for a human wizard, a 2/1, that says when it enters, we get to choose 1, because this is the Charming Prince super cycle of creatures that enter and have a charm effect of choose 1 of 3. We either make a 1/1 bird with flying, pretty good. We bounce another non-land permanent to its owner's hand. It could be one of ours, it could be an opponent's, so it's removal, it's rebuy, whatever you need, or we draw a card. Whatever we may need, Ether Channeler gives it to us. It's a great thing for us to keep rebouncing. If we need more cards, bounce it for that. If our opponent's things are getting out of hand, bounce it for that. Or flicker it for that, I should say. If we want more birds, we can always get more birds. Great. Next up, we've seen Alisei. Alisei is a way of drawing Alphanod. That's why it's in this section. Same is true of Alphanod, but Alphanod also draws us a card every time we cast our second spell each turn. Circuit Mender is 3 generic mana for a 2/3 artifact creature insect. When it enters, we gain 2 life, and when it leaves, we draw a card. So if we flicker it, we will draw a card because it left, and we will gain 2 life because it entered. Great. Pretty nice. Almost like a built-in little, what's that spell called? 1 and a white, gain 3 life, draw a card, revitalize. Love that card. Halia, we've already seen, gains us life every time any creature or artifact, including herself, enters. And at our end step, if we've gained 3 or more life, we draw a card. Lauren of the Third Path is great. She's 2 and a white for a 2/1 legendary human artificer with vigilance that when she enters, we destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. So this is repeatable artifact or enchantment removal if we flicker her. And if we let her untap, we can tap her and we and target opponent each draw a card. So we're getting a little bit more of the Legend of Yangcheng second chapter vibes here with a little bit of political card advantage. Nice. Repeatable card advantage too. Similar to Rumor Gatherer. A white and double... Goodness, I can read. This is 1 and double white for a 2/1 elf wizard with an alliance ability. Alliance is just creature fall. Whenever we have a creature we control enter, we scry 1, and if it's the second time this is resolved this turn, instead we draw a card. So the first creature comes in, we scry. The second one, we draw a card. The third one, we scry. The fourth one, we scry. All of them are scries except for the second one, which is a card draw. So as long as we get 2 creatures to enter, we get a free sort of build your own opt. Scry 1 and draw. Pretty good. Also, look how cute this art is. This is an elephant with a message for you. This is a giraffe with a letter for you. This bear has a box. This is a duck and a goat. Just a cool art. I really like Streets of New Capenna. Next up we have Serum Visionary, a card that comes with Serum Visions. A 2/2 Vidalcan Wizard for 2 and a blue that says when it enters, we draw a card and scry 2. That is Serum Visions. Great. Serum Visions that comes on a Grey Ogre. I'm into it. Great thing to flicker. We've seen Alphanod. We haven't yet, however, seen the Sad Robot. Solemn Simulacrum is 4 generic mana for an artifact creature golem that is a 2/2. When it enters, we may Rampant Growth, search our library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle, and when it dies, we may draw a card. So usually this is not drawing us cards in this deck, but it could. We've got the option to let it die during combat, for example, and then if it does, that's okay. But usually we're flickering this to continually find more lands that we can put into play, albeit tapped, and then accelerate ourselves that way. Pretty good. Cloudblazer is next. This is 3, a white and a blue for a 2/2 human scout with flying. When it enters, we gain 2 life and draw 2 cards. Great. 5 mana to gain 2 and draw 2 and get a Wind Drake on top of it? Sounds good to me. We've seen the Council of 4. It draws us more cards anytime anyone draws their second card during their turn, plus it makes us some knights. Legend of Yangchen's second chapter lets us draw 3 if we let an opponent draw 3. Anti-Causal Vestige puts a card in our hand when it leaves the battlefield, and then lets us put a permanent into play from our hand, possibly. And Tomb of Horrors Adventurer lets us take the initiative, which can do a lot for us, but at the very least, its first room in the Undercity is Lay of the Land, so it draws us a basic land. So there you go. Next up, we have our acceleration section. These are all cards, of course I usually tag it as ramp, and so I have this time. These will help us go a little faster than our 1 land per turn. Soul Ring is a single generic mana for an artifact that taps for 2 colorless. It's extremely powerful. Yeah, definitely put it in your deck. Wayfarer's Bauble gives us a 1 mana artifact that if we pay 2, tap and sack it, we get 2 Rampant Growth. Search for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. Great. I really like Wayfarer's Bauble, especially in non-green decks. This is a card that, even though it totally costs 3 mana, 1 to cast and 2 to activate, it's also one that we can spend on 1 turn, and then on another turn, 2 to activate, which is the same cost as Rampant Growth. So we're spending more over the course of multiple turns, so it really doesn't feel like we're spending a lot more than Rampant Growth does itself. And this can find us our planes, our islands, whatever we need, obviously of those 2 options in this deck. We're also playing Arcane Signet. It's a 2 mana rock, 2 mana artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. So in this deck, white or blue, comes in untapped, makes both of our colors. Yeah, we want this. Similarly, we've got an Azorius Signet, another 2 mana rock that if we pay a mana into it and tap it, it makes a white and a blue. So we do have to have mana to put into this in order to tap it for mana, but it filters our mana and it gives us both the colors we need. Very nice. Cloud of Fairies, as we discussed before, when it enters, can untap 2 of our lands, which can give us a little bit of acceleration on turns when we are flickering it. Mindstone is a 2 mana rock, as we've seen, that taps for colorless. Poo-Poo UFO is from the Final Fantasy set. It is a 0/4 flying artifact creature construct alien for 2 generic mana. So it's a 2 mana 0/4 flyer that's not a wall, but it's kind of the same cost and power and toughness as our Wall of Omens, and it flies. Pretty good. It has an ability that we don't care about, which is pay 3, and until end of turn, its base power becomes equal to the number of towns you control. I don't think we have any towns in this deck. What we care about is the fact that we can just tap it in order to put a land from our hand onto the battlefield. We have so much card advantage in this deck, and repeatable card draw, that the times when our hand has a couple of extra lands in it that we really would just wish we could get into play, make this card worth running, because it takes a land out of our hand and puts it on the battlefield and does not say tapped. So we can just tap this, and rather than having our 0/4 flyer to defend us for the next turn cycle, we just get a land into play that we can immediately use. The fact that we can use this ability at instant speed is also great, because maybe we only have 1 mana up, so our opponents don't think we can do anything. We block with the Poo-Poo UFO when they're attacking, then before damage, tap it, use it to put another card into play, or another land into play, use that mana and the mana we already had available to cast a flicker effect and flicker the UFO. Pretty good. Yeah, we've got good tricks with this. Next is Talisman of Progress. Love the talismans. This is another 2 mana rock, taps for colorless, or we can have it tap for white or blue if we're willing to let it do a damage to us in the process, which we always are. Because sometimes you think about it and you're like, but if I lose all my life, I lose the game. That's true. If you need to cast a spell, and you don't need the colored mana for it, just tap this for colorless, and it's the same as a Mind Stone in that way. But if you need the colored mana in order to cast a spell, then being able to tap this for colored mana is the difference between casting a spell or not. It's 1 damage is the difference between casting a spell or not. It's probably, in this deck, the difference between casting your 2nd or 3rd spell in the turn or not. Would you pay 1 life to cast an extra spell during your turn? I sure would. I would do it 6, 7, or 8 times during the game. And if that means I'm down by 6, 7, or 8 life, that also means I've cast 6, 7, or 8 more spells probably than my opponents have. And the person who casts the most spells is likeliest to be the one who's farthest ahead. So, Talisman of Progress, if you need the colored mana, it's worth the life almost every time. And if you don't, it always just taps for colorless. Great. We've seen our Solemn Simulacrum. It can ramp at growth us when it first comes in. Anti-Causal Vestige can ramp us by letting us, when it leaves the battlefield, draw a card and then put a permanent from our hand onto the battlefield tapped, which could be a land. But we also have Peregrine Drake. This is very similar to Cloud of Fairies, but more expensive. 4 and a blue gives us a 2/3 Drake with flying that when it enters, we untap up to 5 lands. So being able to flicker this is so powerful for us. We cast this once for 5 mana, maybe that's all we did that turn. But probably not, because we cast it and we untap 5 lands when it comes in, so it's like it was free. We just needed to front the 5 mana, and we get it back refunded to us right away, and we can cast something else, thereby triggering OG and anything else that cares about flurrying. And then on a later turn, we cast 2 spells, trigger OG, use OG to flicker the Peregrine Drake, and untap 5 lands that we had tapped to cast those first 2 spells. And now we can cast even more spells that turn. Peregrine Drake, very, very powerful for us. 5 lands, I probably don't need to explain, is more than 2 lands. So Cloud of Fairies gives us a lot of value, don't get me wrong, but Peregrine Drake can give us so much acceleration that it's just ridiculous. We are not, in this deck, running any of the crazy infinite combos you can do with Peregrine Drake, because that's not what we're going for here. But yeah, still very powerful in our deck too. So that covers our acceleration section. I do want to take a look at all the discounts that we can get. We've already seen all of them. Monk class, first level, makes all of our second spells cost 1 less. And Alisei and the Uthros Psionicist both make our second spell cost 2 less. So that's pretty sweet for us as ways to accelerate each turn by making our second spell cost a lot less. Yeah, even if it's just 1 less thanks to the Monk class, that's worth it to us. So that's our discount section. Let's take a look now at our interaction, which I usually, as usual, have tagged as removal. Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares, I often say, are almost the same card. They're both instants that cost a single white mana and then exile a target creature and give that creature's controller a little bit of a kickback. Swords to Plowshares gives that creature's controller life equal to the creature's power, and Path to Exile gives that creature's controller a rampant growth effect. They get to search for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. So both of these cards are extremely powerful, unconditional, exile effect, instant speed, single mana removal for creatures. If you're playing white, put these in your deck. They're so good. Airbender Ascension, when it enters, we can airbend a target creature. Extraordinary Journey can exile, almost like airbending, X creatures, based on the double X in its cost, and its owner can recast those creatures for as long as they remain exiled. Monk class, second ability, bounces a target non-land permanent. Ether Channeler, when it enters, bounces a non-land target permanent. Imprisoned to the Moon we haven't yet seen. This is 2 and a blue for an aura that enchants a creature, land, or planeswalker, and makes that permanent into a colorless land that taps for colorless mana and causes it to lose all other card types and abilities. This is a very powerful effect that shuts down creatures and planeswalkers and can shut down lands, but not usually are we doing that with it. Because we say, hey, opponent, would you like to have access to 1 more mana and never have access to that planeswalker or creature again? Because unless they have enchantment removal, or a way to bounce any non-land permanent, or otherwise destroy it, Imprisoned to the Moon is going to stay on their creature or planeswalker. And if it's their commander, that commander has not left the battlefield or changed zones. It's just now a land. So if we take this and use it to remove the opponent at the table who has the most powerful sort of value engine commander, if we use it to remove their commander by making it into a land, they're going to either have to find enchantment removal, be able to interact with their own lands, or make a deal with someone else at the table who has one of those effects so that they can get their commander back. Imprisoned to the Moon is a great way to shut down commanders that way, but it doesn't have to be. You can obviously hit a Galta with this, and now they don't have their 12/12 Trampler. Great. We've seen Lorna the Third Path. She enters and disenchants an artifact or an enchantment. We also have Reflector Mage. This is a classic from Oath of the Gatewatch. It's 1, a white, and a blue for a 2/3 human wizard that says when it enters, we return target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand, and that creature's owner can't cast spells with the same name as that creature until your next turn. Another thing that's great for us to hit commanders with, but it doesn't have to be. It just means get that off the battlefield. You can recast it, but not next turn. You gotta wait another turn later. So that amount of tempo advantage can really help us out, especially if we are flickering the Reflector Mage and doing this multiple times and getting rid of all the scary things, and knowing that they're not gonna be back at least for one turn cycle. Touch the Spirit Realm is an Oblivion Ring effect, as is All Fate Stalker, but both can also be used for flickering. Illithid Harvester is a weird one and a really cool one. This is another adventure creature. We'll talk about the adventure first. This is X and double blue for a sorcery called Plant Tadpoles. It says tap X target creatures. They don't untap during their controller's next untap steps. So this is a great way to give ourselves some evasion, to tap down blockers so that we can't, obviously be blocked by those creatures that are tapped, or otherwise sort of turn them off so that they're not likely to be able to be as useful for the next turn cycle. And since they don't untap during their controller's next untap step, they're going to be untapped for everyone else in addition to us. So if we hit, opponent A's creatures with this, we'll go to opponent A's turn, they will untap, but not those creatures, and then opponent B and opponent C, and then us again. We all get to attack them without having to worry about those creatures, or any creatures they have, maybe, other than the ones they cast during the turn when they couldn't untap these ones. So that's all pretty good. But even better is the Illithid Harvester's own enters trigger. This is a 4 and a blue 4/4 horror that says Ceramorphosis. When this creature enters, turn any number of target tapped non-token creatures face down. They are 2/2 horror creatures. This is not until end of turn. This is permanent. We are essentially taking every creature that we want to, that is tapped, and flipping it into a 2/2 vanilla creature for as long as it's on the battlefield. Now, an opponent can flicker it, and it'll come back as it face up. If they use a scam effect, like Fake Your Own Death, and cause it to die and return to the battlefield, it'll come back as its front face up. If it's a commander, well, they're going to have to find a way to kill it, or bounce it, or flicker it, any of those things. This is a great humble effect that removes things by making them vanilla, even without removing them from the battlefield. And essentially saying, you did a big swing last turn, and so now we play our Harvester, and all of your creatures that you attacked with are just vanilla bears? Okay. I hope you enjoy that. It's especially nice because even though this works very well with the adventure, because we cast this on one turn, tap down a bunch of things, they will not untap before our next turn when we cast the Harvester, and we get to turn those things that are all tapped from Plant Tadpoles into vanilla 2/2 horrors. That's not the only way we use it in this deck, because maybe the turn after that, some other players have tapped their creatures for mana or to attack or whatever it may be. Then we go to our next turn and we flicker the Harvester, and everything that's tapped we can choose to turn into a 2/2 horror, and we can continually do that, which forces our opponents to say, am I willing to even tap my creature to attack? Am I willing to swing at a different opponent or at us? Because if they attack us and they can't kill us, anything that they've attacked with that wasn't vigilant or that they can't protect in some other way is going to become a vanilla 2/2 horror. Great, so this can really change the way the game plays. It's a lot of fun in this deck. Next up is Riptide Gearhulk from Aetherdrift. This is 1 double white and double blue, so hard to get a good discount on this from our discount effects, but maybe this is our first spell for the turn. It gives us a 2/5 artifact creature construct with double strike and prowess. So prowess is very good in general. In our deck, we have an awful lot of creatures, so fewer non-creature spells, but still prowess can be great for us. And it says when it enters, for each opponent, put up to 1 target non-land permanent that player controls into its owner's library, third from the top. So we get to remove something from each other player's playmat and just tuck it into their library, and we'll do that every time this enters, especially when we flicker it. This is a great card to flicker at instant speed, to turn back into a double striking blocker, but also to remove like an attacking creature and an extra creature on each other opponent's playmat when we do that. Notably, if we choose to tuck a commander, that commander can be put back in the command zone, but they don't have to do that. They can just say, I'll put it in my library third from the top because I'll draw it in a few turns. If, at that point, they have to shuffle their library because either they cracked an Evolving Wilds or because someone else causes them to have to shuffle or cast like a Wheel of Fortune effect, whatever it may be, at that point, they don't get to pull their commander back out and put it back in the command zone. It has already had the opportunity to go to the command zone because when it changed zones from us tucking it in their library in the first place. If they don't choose to not, if they choose to put it in their library, it's in their library until they draw it again. So yeah, just a nice little note there. And as we've seen, Legend of Yongshen's first ability can exile a permanent mana value 3 or greater from one of our opponents, or maybe multiple ones, and Avatar Yongchen can, when we cast our second spell each turn, airbend on target non-land permanent. So yeah, that covers all of our interaction section. We are running 2 Wraths. We've seen one of them, the Eternal Wanderer's Ultimate, which she can do the turn she comes down, pretty good. And we have Avatar's Wrath. This is a solid card that helps in ways that are synergistic with our deck. 2 and double white for a sorcery that says choose up to 1 target creature, then airbend all other creatures. So every creature in the battlefield is exiled. That means all of the tokens are gone, with the exception of 1 creature, which is probably going to be our commander, but it might not be. And then every other player who has creatures in exile now that have been airbent gets to recast it for 2 generic rather than its cost, which means we have our creatures that are able to be recast very easily, since now they're very cheap, and we can start rebuilding before everyone else because we likely have mana left over. Also because, until our next turn, our opponents cannot cast spells from anywhere other than their hands, which means any of those airbend creatures don't get to be cast because they're not in hand, they're in exile. So all of that stuff is going to have to either wait for a whole turn cycle to come back, or if it's like a commander, they can choose not to airbend it, instead put it in the command zone, and they can recast it on their next turn if they want to, and that's probably all they're going to get to do. And then we exile Avatar's Wrath because we can't recur this. So yeah, this can really help us, giving us the easiest way to recast and rebuy our creatures by just casting them for 2 generic apiece as we rebuild our board, and slows down our opponents quite a lot. So this is a great thing for us to do, around turn 6, right before we win on turn 8, that kind of thing. Those are our Wraths. Let's take a look now at our supplemental categories, starting with our payoff category. These are all cards that reward us for doing what we were going to do anyway, and we've seen most of them. Dour Port Mage cares about our creatures leaving the battlefield without dying, draws us cards. Extraordinary Journey cares about any non-token creatures entering from exile or being cast from exile, draws us cards. Halia cares about our creatures and artifacts entering, and thereby gains us life, which can also draw us a card. Rumor Gatherer also cares about our creatures entering, which can scry for us or draw us cards. Soul Herder cares about our creatures being exiled from the battlefield, or any creatures being exiled from the battlefield, gets counters on it. And Pegasus Guardian, at the beginning of our end step, if we have a permanent that we controlled that left the battlefield this turn, we get a Pegasus for it. Great. We also have Genku Future Shaper. This is 2 white and a blue for a 2/5 legendary Moonfolk Wizard that says whenever another non-token permanent we control leaves the battlefield, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn and make a creature token with those characteristics. We get either a 2/2 white Moonfolk, a 2/2 white Fox with Vigilance, a 1/2 blue Moonfolk with Flying, or a 1/1 black Rat with Lifelink. So we're only going to get one of each of these each turn, but we might get all 3. Not unlikely for us to do in this deck. And Genku lets us pay 3, a white and a blue, and put a 1/1 counter on each creature we control, just in case we needed more value from this Modern Horizons 3 card. So yeah, a nice payoff for any of our flicker effects. Blessed Sanctuary is also great in this deck. This is 3 and double white for an enchantment that says prevent all non-combat damage that would be dealt to you and creatures you control. Incredible protection. Obviously, combat damage is not non-combat damage, but any damage that's like a lightning bolt or a rabid bite, that damage is just going to be prevented when it's dealt to us or our creatures. But if it's like a fight effect, our creature will still deal damage back to the other creature that's fighting it. It just won't have any damage dealt to it. Pretty good. And whenever a non-token creature we control enters, we make a 2/2 white unicorn creature token. So basically just a bear. And I mentioned that because this is a Jumpstart card. Jumpstart doesn't have tokens, so I don't know if these 2/2 white unicorn creature tokens have been printed ever. Yeah, it was only ever reprinted in Jumpstart 22, so I don't know that there are 2/2 white unicorns. They may be made by some other card, but you can obviously use anything you need to represent 2/2 white vanilla creatures. But we're going to get one every time we have any of our non-token creatures enter, and that's going to happen a lot in our Blink deck. And that covers our payoff section. Let's take a look now at our synergy. We only have 1 card in it, we've already seen, the Starfield Vocalist, synergizes with all of our cards by giving us double triggers on our interest triggers, or doubling our interest triggers, that is. Pretty sweet for us. That's all we've got for that. We're going to look now at our protection section. These are cards that protect us or our things, and we've seen most of them. Disorder in the Court can protect our things. This section includes every effect that is a flicker effect that can be used at instant speed. So we'll just look at those. Disorder in the Court will do that. Momentary Blink will do that. Waterbender's Restoration, Resto Angel, the channel effect of Touch the Spirit Realm, Deadeye Navigator's Flicker effect, and Pegasus Guardian's Rescue the Full Adventure will all do that. We also have Dour Port Mage, which can be activated to bounce one of our creatures to its owner's hand. That protects the creature from dying or being exiled in a way we can't get back. Blessed Sanctuary protects our creatures and us from all non-combat damage. And Githzerai Monk is 4 and a white for a 3/2 Gith Monk with Flash and Flying. So we remember we can flash this in. That has a Psychic Defense, which says when this creature enters, tap all creatures you don't control. So this is a very powerful effect and something really, really great for us to be able to use to cause havoc on the table and to finish our opponents off. Because this is every creature in play tapped. So that means all of our creatures are now unblockable. Unless our opponents have flash effects that can bring creatures in and suddenly block, we cast this or flash this in, and suddenly we're attacking with a bunch of stuff. Nothing can be blocked. Slammed. We go to our next opponent, and they can see that, yeah, maybe we have some of our stuff tapped down, but both of our other opponents have all of their creatures tapped down. So the way is wide open for them. Maybe we've even made a deal with them. We say, we're going to tap down everything, but we won't attack you. We'll attack opponent B, as long as you attack opponents B and C instead of us. And we make a good deal, and there you go. We can use this and flicker it and keep doing this every turn if we want to, until our opponents are just dead. That's pretty solid. But we have it in the protection section because we can flash it in. Meaning, on an opponent's turn, they go to combat, before they declare attacks, we flash in the Githzerai Monk, tap down all their creatures, now they can't attack us. Good protection. And that is our protection section. We're going to go now to our evasion section, which we will also see the Githzerai Monk in again. There it is. We've seen Disorder in the Court, which causes our the creatures that we have slow flickered, to come back in tapped, which means we can use this on our opponent's creatures and thereby either get them off the battlefield for now or get them off the battlefield for a little while and they come back tapped, so we're still going to be able to attack with it. Just helps us there. And we've got several other cool cards in this section. Encouraging Aviator is a recent addition from Secrets of Strixhaven. This is 2 and a blue for a 2/3 Bird Wizard with Flying that says whenever it attacks, it becomes prepared. Being prepared means this spell, this prepare spell that's built into it, we have access to it. We can cast a copy of it from exile, and when we do that, unprepares it, but it will become re-prepared again whenever it attacks. And that spell is just Jump. It's a 1 blue instant to give something flying. We can use this on our opponent's creatures when they attack each other to suddenly surprise, people with attackers that they didn't expect to be evasive. We can use this to help an opponent out if they're being attacked by a flyer and give one of their creatures flying, so now it can block. But mostly we're using this on our creatures so we can sneak in some damage, in addition to casting a single mana spell, which might be the second spell we cast that turn, and be able to continually do that over and over as long as we keep attacking with the Encouraging Aviator. So this gives us access to more spells than, again, the spells we just have in our deck, and spells that we can cast at instant speed, so that we're able to maybe trigger our commander on opponents' turns as well. Pretty sweet. We also have Toby Beastie Befriender. This is 2 and a white for a 1/1 legendary human wizard that says when Toby enters, we make a 4/4 white beast creature token that can't attack or block alone. And as long as we control 4 or more creature tokens you control have flying. So yeah, Toby comes in, we make a 4/4. We cast 2 spells and flicker Toby with our commander. We make another 4/4. Those tokens can't attack or block alone, but now we have 2 of them, and we probably have other creatures as well. Every time we do that, as long as we get more tokens, and we're going to have plenty of tokens in this deck from all those birds that we've been seeing we can make, having 4/4 flyers that, even though they have to attack or block as groups, 4/4 flyers are angels. So being able to get up to 4 of those tokens is not hard, and then all of these 4/4s are essentially angels for us to attack with and to block with. Terrific. That's great for evasion, giving all of our tokens flying. And we have Moonshaker Cavalry. This card has gone down in price a lot thanks to Secrets of Strixhaven Commander, thank goodness, even though I do love the Wilds of Eldraine original printing. This is our biggest, most expensive card mana-wise. 5 and triple white for a 6/6 Spirit Knight with Flying that when it enters, all of our creatures gain flying and get a bonus to power and toughness equal to the number of creatures we control. This is a wide deck. We are going wide with this. We have a lot of tokens. We have a lot of creatures in general. Moonshaker Cavalry gives all of our stuff a huge power and toughness bonus and makes them all fly. So they're likely not to die when they're blocked if they can be blocked by flying or reach blockers, and they're likely to do a lot of damage when they swing in. But what if we play this as our first spell that turn, make all of our things huge, then play a single mana additional spell that turn? OG triggers. We flicker the cavalry, it comes back in, all of our creatures get flying a second time, who cares? But they get that +X a second time, so now they've gotten +2X and +2X. Incredible swing. Probably we kill everyone at the table. Moonshaker Cavalry is our Crater Hoof. I don't normally put this in my decks because I don't really love this like win with one big thing, but in this deck, you just don't expect it. And it's really, really fun to see it come out in a blink deck and you win with combat damage. Yeah, I really like that. So that's our evasion section. Let's talk about our pump section now. Things that pump up our things, pump up our creatures. We've seen all of these already. Moonshaker Cavalry, of course, gives that huge pump when it enters. Genku we can spend 5 mana to put a counter on each of our creatures. Cosmic Grand Zenith, when we cast our second spell each turn, can put a counter on each of our creatures. Again, we're usually using this to make soldier tokens, since those counters do go away when we flicker the creatures that are on them, or that have the counters on them, but still. But we also have Sublime Archangel. This is 2 and double white for a 4/3 angel with flying and exalted. Exalted means whenever any of our creatures attacks alone, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn, thanks to Sublime Angel having exalted. Exalted gives that boost to whichever creature is attacking alone, whether it is the angel or any other creature. Which is important because it also gives all of our creatures exalted. So the idea is if we attack with a single creature, it gets +1/+1 equal to the number of creatures we have, because each of those creatures, including itself, has exalted. So it's not doubled up for the Archangel because it says other creatures here, and it has exalted already, but this is a way for us to say, oh, we only want to attack with one thing. Maybe we want to hold back all of our creatures in order to block, or in order to continue to get value from them in other ways. We attack with one thing. Sublime Archangel is in play. Maybe we're attacking with the Archangel, and we have 10 other creatures. Great, we're now attacking with a 14/13 in the air, because it's going to get an exalted trigger for each creature, including itself, as long as it's attacking alone. Great. This can be really, really powerful for us, and is one of our finishers. Sweet. So that is our pump section. Let's take a look at the ways we have to recur things now. We've only seen Momentary Blink, which has flashback, so we can get a second casting from it. But we also have Sun Titan. This is a classic. 4 and double white for a 6/6 giant with vigilance. Great to attack with, great to block with. Love the Sun Titan. It's good to flicker as well, because whenever it enters or attacks, so if we attack with it, we get this value, or if we flicker it, we get this value, we may return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield. Now we do have plenty of cards that are mana value 4 or greater, but most of the cards in our deck, especially our permanents, are 3 or less. So if those happen to die, we can get them back with the Sun Titan. If we get them milled or something, we can get them back with our Sun Titan. A really nice way to recur things, and even if we're not in need of that recurability, it's still a 6/6 vigilant body that we can use to great effect in this deck. Excellent. That is our recursion section. I do want to go over all the different ways we have to make tokens. I believe we've seen all of them. Clarion Spirit, of course, gives us a 1/1 flyer when we cast our second spell. Taigum doesn't make a token so much as it does make a token because it copies our second spell each turn. So if that second spell was a creature, then we get it as a token. Ether Channeler can make us another 1/1 flyer. Cosmic Grand Zenith can make us 2 1/1 soldiers. Toby makes us a 4/4 beast that can't attack or block alone, but can also make all of our tokens fly once we have 4 or more of them. Wingblade Disciple gives us a 1/1 bird. Genku can give us a 2/2 Vigilant Fox, a 1/2 Flying Moonfolk, or a 1/1 Lifelinking Rat. Blessed Sanctuary gives us 2/2 Unicorns whenever we have any non-token creature enter. The Council of Four can give us 2/2 Knights every time any player casts their second spell during their turn. Pegasus Guardian gives us a 1/1 Pegasus that flies at our end step if we had a permanent we control leave the battlefield during our turn. Storm of Saruman copies the second spell we cast each turn and makes that spell non-legendary, so if it was a creature spell, we get it as a token. The Eternal Wanderer, if we zero her, gives us a 2/2 double striking white samurai creature token. And Tomb of Horrors Adventurer lets us copy our second spell each turn, and if we've completed a dungeon, copy it twice. And of course, if that second spell was a creature, it comes in as a token copy. That is our token section. The last section we have are our Wincons. I've just put these here. They're not the only way we can win the game. We can absolutely do the normal Blink thing of just outvaluing our opponents. But Toby, making it so that we can keep flickering Toby and getting 4/4 tokens and eventually giving all of our many tokens flying, can really be a solid win con for us. Sublime Archangel, giving all of our creatures exalted and having us swing in with one big thing, can win the game for us. Githzerai Monk, tapping down every creature in play that isn't ours, making it so everything we have is unblockable. That's a pretty solid win con for any Merfolk deck, so might as well for us. And of course, Moonshaker Cavalry, giving all of our creatures a huge power and toughness bonus, and flying is a great win con as well. And that covers every one of the spells in our deck. As usual, we're going to go over our land base now, starting with our basics. We're running 25 basics in this deck. We're a little bit more white than we are blue, so we've got 14 plains and 11 islands. It works out for us. Obviously, we're running the Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate basics, so we can have a little bit of flavor text when we look at our things. I like, in these decks, to run different arts, because each different art in Baldur's Gate has different flavor text, and I like to read the flavor text every time my basics come out. I know that sounds like it would be annoying. Most of my pods that I've played in don't seem to have a problem with it. So yeah, I think it's fun. We're running Irrigated Farmland. This is a bicycle land. That means it is the plains and island types inherently, so it inherently taps for white or blue, and it comes in tapped, or we can cycle it for 2 generic mana. Again, that means if it's in our hand, we can pay the 2 and discard it to draw a card rather than use it as a land. Something we might do, much like Mind Stone, if we're desperate for card draw early on or late in the game when we just don't need the mana anymore and we'd rather have a different card. We've got good options for it either way. We are running, if you wanted to upgrade this, the suggestion I have for you is Hallowed Fountain, the shock land. Costs much more money, but it's also a dual-typed land, and it can come in as an untapped dual if you shock it in. Glacial Fortress is a check land. It taps for white or blue, and it enters tapped unless we control a plains or an island, which doesn't just include these 25 basics we have, but also Irrigated Farmland, which is a plains and an island. So there's 27 cards in this deck that can make Glacial Fortress enter untapped, so it's basically an untapped duel for us almost all of the time in this deck, so you might as well run it. But if you want to upgrade it, I might say that Deserted Beach, the slow land, is an upgrade. Deserted Beach comes in untapped as long as it's not the first or second land you have in play. So yeah, I also think that it's worth cutting one of your basics and including Deserted Beach in addition to Glacial Fortress once Deserted Beach drops in price, which I assume will be happening at time of recording later this year when Reality Fracture drops and we get the allied slow lands back in standard. Next, we've got Sky Cloud Expanse. This is a filter land. It's just like our Azorius Signet. Pay 1 into it, tap it makes both of our colors. Filters into our colors, sounds great to me. Helps us out. Everything I said about the Signet is just as true here. We have 4 fixing lands in this deck. Of course, we're running Command Tower. This is a untapped land that has the same text as Arcane Signet. Makes 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, so white or blue in this deck. So it's an untapped duel. Of course we're going to run this. Just like we're going to run Path of Ancestry, which is a tap land with the same text as Command Tower. But it also says when we use its mana to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander, we get to scry 1. So obviously, OG shares creature types with themselves. But we also have an additional 12 other humans in this deck, and 2 monks that aren't humans. There's also 2 human monks in addition to OG. But the point being, we have OG plus 14 other creatures, so 15 total creatures of our many creature deck give us a scry in addition to just us being able to tap this for both of our colors. Path of Ancestry sounds good to me. We're running Myriad Landscape. This is a tap land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to search our library for up to 2 basic land cards that share a land type, so either 2 basic plains or 2 basic islands, then put them on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. So even though this comes in tapped, and the lands it finds come in tapped, and we have to pay, tap, and sack it to go find those lands, this is 1 land drop that eventually becomes 2 lands in play, so it is acceleration for us. It's just slow acceleration, if you'll pardon the oxymoron. Not terrible for our deck, not superlative, but solid for a budget land base like this one. Similar is Temple of the False God. It's not anyone's favorite land, but it's an untapped land that taps for 2 colorless mana, like Sol Ring. It's a soul land. We just have to have at least 4 other lands in play in order to activate it, so we need 5 including itself. So it's not accelerating us in our early game, which admittedly is when we most want acceleration, but it will accelerate us mid-game and late game, and we still want plenty of mana in this deck, so it's pretty solid for us, especially if this is our 5th land, and we're jumping from making 4 mana to making 6. That's pretty good. So yeah, Temple of the False God I think fits in decks of this kind of power level and budget very well. We're running Adakar Wastes. It's a pain land. It is a land version of the Talisman that we saw earlier. Taps for colorless, or it taps for white or blue if we're willing to let it do a damage to us. Everything I said about our Talisman is just as true here. Talisman of Progress is a great card. Having it in our land base, we might as well. Sounds good. We also have Port Town. This is a reveal land. As it enters, we can reveal a plains or island card from our hand. And if we don't, it comes in tapped, and either way it taps for white or blue. So it kind of works like our Glacial Fortress check land, in that as long as we've got a basic plains or island, our bicycle land, or as you'll soon see, our tango land in our hand, this will be an untapped duel. Otherwise, this will come in as a tap land, and that's totally fine for our kind of deck. If you want to upgrade this, I usually say that the best upgrade to reveal lands are the Verges. Flood Farm Verge is expensive because the Verges are getting played in Standard right now, since they are still in Duskmourn and Aetherdrift, but it would be a solid upgrade to Port Town if you want to do that kind of upgrade. We also have Temple of Enlightenment. It's a scry land. Comes in tapped, taps for both of our colors, scries when it enters. Excellent. Upgrading this to the Meticulous Archive Surveil land would be a lot more expensive, but it gives you more value, and it's a dual-typed land. However, this is totally fine, and it's perennially reprinted, especially since it's in Foundations right now. Great. And then I mentioned the Tango lands. We've got Prairie Stream. This is a plains and an island, just like our bicycle land, so it helps us with our reveal land and our check land. Taps for white or blue inherently, and it comes in tapped unless we control 2 or more basic lands. So as long as we have basic lands in play, then not just typed lands, but either 2 islands, 2 plains, or 1 of each, then this comes in as an untapped duel. Not unlikely for us to have happen in this deck. And of course, if you were to want to upgrade this, again, I would say Hallowed Fountain, the Shock Land, is a good idea to do it. Finally, we're only running 2 utility lands in this deck. That's why we have so many basics. Castle Vantress, originally from Throne of Eldraine, my favorite set, is a land that enters tapped unless we control an island. Doesn't have to be a basic island, so pretty solid, and it taps for blue. So this is 1 more blue source for us in the deck. So we're actually closer on our lands that tap for white versus blue than it seems like just looking at the basics. We can also pay 2 and a blue, or 2 and double blue, and tap the castle to scry 2. We're not usually doing this because we mostly have, with our curve and with the reasons that we want to double spell so much, we're not usually in a position where we can spend 5 mana, these 4 plus tapping the castle, on just a scry. But sometimes, just like with our bicycle land, you run out of gas. You may get a whole bunch of lands in a row, and you don't have the ability to get value without getting more spells in hand. So maybe you use Castle Vantress at that point to filter some lands off the top of your library, or set yourself up with the scry to draw the thing you most need next turn, just like you would when you're scrying 2 from OG entering. It's nice to have as a backup. And again, the cost of inclusion is so low. Finally, we have Demolition Field. As I often say, the kind of decks that I build are intended for a table that uses a power level of decks that usually those kinds of players are not looking for an experience where their lands are getting blown up. And that's fair. Not everyone wants that kind of thing at their commander table. They're not looking for that in Magic. But you do have to have an answer for problematic non-basics. For example, if someone is running a Voltron deck and a Rogue's Passage, making their huge commander unblockable and making it so they can win more easily. Or if they've got a Glacial Chasm and they're being prevented from taking any damage themselves, so that anyone whose game plan relies on combat damage isn't able to be executed. Any card that helps someone else's game plan significantly or hurts our ability to execute our game plan, that land is a threat. And in Magic, threats have answers. Demolition Field is my suggestion for that answer, even at tables that don't want to lose access to their mana. This is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to destroy a non-basic land that an opponent controls, and that opponent then gets to search their library for a basic land and put it on the battlefield untapped. And so do we. So neither we nor they are down a land, so we haven't really been denied any mana, and neither have they been denied mana. As long as, of course, we still had basics left in our libraries. But we have gotten rid of the problematic non-basic that was a threat to us in this game. And so, because we haven't hurt anyone's ability to produce mana, really, this is a fine answer, especially since it's just a one-of in our deck. I think anyone at the kind of tables that I'm talking about would agree with me. And that sums it up. Again, I'm releasing new Baldur's Gate Commander decks every Monday until I've done them all, so let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a specific commander or deck style. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you want to support what I do here, make sure to like and subscribe, ring the bell if you want to be notified when my videos go live, consider joining my Patreon at patreon.com/secondmonitormagic, or becoming a member of this channel on YouTube, and remember that magic is fun. You should play more Magic.